What's good, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Happy Monday. As always, I'm Ari here with Korea. How are you doing today, Korea?
I can't really be complaining right now. I mean, you look at things right now, and the Mariners are on an 8-game winning streak. Huh? Can we talk about that? Sweeping Toronto, even though it felt like a road atmosphere at some points, sweeping them at home feels a great feeling. So right now, Mariners playing some of the best baseball I've seen in a while. So I can't complain. How you doing?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Not even best baseball. I mean, we know the run they made late last year, where it was relying on a bunch of just one run kind of fluky type wins. But this year, I think I want to say it's a plus 22 run differential. So they're actually winning many games convincingly. I think they scored 5+ in 5 of the last 6. So definitely a fun stretch. And they have 2 against Washington and 4 against Texas this week before the All-Star break. So hopefully they can keep up the momentum into Washington tomorrow. But we'll get right into the MLB All-Star rosters. Yesterday on Sunday, the reserves were revealed, and there were definitely some let's just say questionable players left off / players that made it. So we can just start off with the American League reserves. We have Jose Trevino, the catcher from the Yankees, infielders Luis Ariz, Xander Bogaerts, Jose Ramirez, Andres Jimenez, outfielders George Springer, Byron Buxton, Andrew Benintendi, Kyle Tucker, Julio Rodriguez, and then Jordan Alvarez made it. Obviously, as Mariners fans, the one player missing it seems at the most is Ty France. And I have a Twitter thread from a Mariners reporter I was going to bring up, but first, I'll just get your thoughts, Korea. What was your? I mean, he was he was a top 2 contender to be a starter, and so I thought he was like an automatic to be a reserve. But yeah, I'll leave it up to you, Korea, now.
Yeah, no, I think it's just there's this hidden agenda in the media that I believe to be real. And it's this hidden agenda that the Mariners are they don't get any love because of all this East Coast bias. And it's evident right here. You have Ty France, who I think is first in B WAR, WRC
I have
plus,
some,
extra
yeah,
base hits. Like all these, yeah, you like look at this. He leads the American first baseman in batting average, OBP, OPS, and B WAR. How is he not in the All-Star game? These stats are like absolutely like the most crucial stats for evaluating how good a player is. And you're going to tell me just because of what you've seen in terms of his batting average that Luis Ariz is a better first baseman than Ty France? Are you actually serious?
and
You had
then
him
what?
as like it's crazy to think that like George, it was just between Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Ty France for the starting position. So that means that okay, Ty France is obviously going to be a reserve, but what? And then like you look at this tweet right here from Angie Mentic, like he's not even a first baseman really. Like he's not even playing first base on a every. He's not the everyday first baseman.
Yeah.
Like it's ridiculous. Like it's just this East Coast bullshit bias. And I've said this ever since the vote came out that Vladimir Guerrero was going to start. I said Ty France is my all-star first baseman because he not only deserved the starting spot, he not only deserved a roster spot as well. And he didn't get either. I think this is just ridiculous. It's just I honestly think it's just East Coast bias. Because look, you see how many you see look at this. You obviously have the Astros, who are pretty much one of the best teams in the American League. That's fair. But can you really tell me how what Luis Ariz has really done? Like, yes, he's hitting the ball well, but he's not a first baseman. He plays first baseman like only not even half the time he's on the field. Like, it's ridiculous. It's just a shame that, you know, over the past season, like literally over this past offseason, the Mariners were getting so much love on by the media here. And I'm calling out the media right now because this is bullshit. The media loved the Mariners moves. They were loving everything. And then Ty France started hitting the ball well, and everyone picked up on that. But now you're not going to put him in the All-Star game? Even though he's leading in B WAR, on base percentage, OPS, batting, like He's one of the best first basemen in the American League. I'd say he's a top 5 first baseman in baseball. Yeah, I'd say it. He's definitely a top 5. He's a top 3 baseman and first baseman in baseball right now. And you're gonna put Luis Horizon over him based on what? What based on what? I don't understand. It's just this agenda that the media has always had, that because the Mariners have always been a small market and how they always come up short in the end of the regular season, how they just miss the playoffs all the time, that we don't produce good talent. This year we traded for Ty France and look what he's done. He's been one of the biggest, in fact, the biggest contributor to this baseball team besides Julio Rodriguez, which I want to shout out first Julio Rodriguez. He is amazing star. He's going to go places, so great to see him in the All-Star game, but once you see that, you got to claim for Ty France because that was egregious. I believe that the Mariners should be having 3 All-Stars this year. Almost, I'd say definitely 3, maybe 4, but I'd say 3 All-Stars at the least. 2 being Julio and Ty France, and then I would argue for Logan Gilbert as well. He's one. I think he is top 5, or I think he's top 4 for pitchers in the American League that have in total wins. He almost picked up his 11th win yesterday, and now we're talking. And now he's not even making the roster. I mean, yes, you can claim for all these guys. I'm not arguing that. You can make an argument for every single pitcher on this list, except for Framber Val. I mean, you can say Valdez just because he's having a great season. Verlander's obviously.
I was gonna say Blackburn, but I think it's because every team needs one representative. So I think that
I would say Blackburn, but the A's just need someone up there. So definitely he's the key reason there. But I just feel like the Mariners just got the end short of the stick, having only one All-Star once again, which I think is ridiculous. We're a bigger market now. We're making a run. Have you not seen what we've been doing in the past 19 games? I feel it's ridiculous that the media just shows fake love to this Mariners team. It happens every year, and look where we are now. But we just use it as fuel because we know that we know that this Mariners team is special. But if the media doesn't, well, I guess we'll find out eventually because this Mariners team just swept half of those All-Stars in Toronto at home in a 4-game series and held them to barely any runs. And this pitching staff and this bullpen has been one of the best bullpens I've seen in a long time. So go ahead, clam for your Toronto Blue Jays who have 4 All-Stars, but you see what the Mariners are doing.
Yeah, I mean, the media asked Ty France after the game yesterday on Sunday, like why he thinks he didn't make it, and even like he said like, oh, I thought I played myself into it. So hopefully France uses this as motivation. I mean, I think he'll still be in the game as like an injury replacement. I'm pretty sure like Alvarez, I don't think he's going to play because he just got put in the injured list. So I'm sure he'll make his way on, but obviously making it as like a replacement isn't the same as, like actually getting voted on by, I believe the players vote on the reserves. So it was pretty shocking. I didn't look for sure, but I'd be willing to bet that pretty much every other runner-up for a starter, like out of the top 2 votes that didn't make it as a starter, like pretty much everyone else, maybe everyone else, at least most of the other runners-up to start made it as a reserve, I would assume. So it was definitely shocking. And then National League, we got Darno, Arenado, Alonso, Jeff McNeil, CJ Crone, Dansby Swanson, Kyle Schwarber, Juan Soto, Starling Marte, Ian Happ, William Contreras. I don't know why. Like, I think they only put him on because, with the brother, with Wilson Contreras. I don't know why he made it. Juan Soto is obviously the big name, but Josh Bell has been the better producer this year for Washington. There's a number, and then there's like Dylan Cease and the AL pitchers who should have made it, I think, and then Carlos Rodon and the NL starter. So there's definitely at least like 4 or 5 questionables. Then the question becomes who they replace. So that's always normally the tougher part, but
yeah. You look at this NL right here, and I mean, first off, you go to the reserves and you see, like, where's Tommy Edman? Edman's like, yes, Edman on paper is not like your typical, but he has produced this year for St. Louis. So where's Tommy Edman, 1? And then number 2, Freddie Freeman? Are we not going to ignore what Freddie Freeman's doing in LA this year, in his first year? Like, Like, it just shows you, like, this MLB fan vote and reserve shit, it's just so flawed. And I feel like this happens every single year with any, and you can take this to like the Pro Bowl selections and the All-Star game selections. Every single year, there's egregious snubs. And I mean, and you mentioned it, it's hard to argue which player you want to replace them, because you can say, like, oh yeah, I want, obviously, like, like a, excuse me, like, you want Ty France in. But sometimes, like, are you like, okay, who do you take out? Obviously, for our argument, it's easy. You take out Luis Ariz because Ty France is the better first baseman. But for stuff like that, you go to the NL pitching staff right there, and you see, like, all those names, and you're like, okay, how do you replace Carlos Rodon with any of those guys? Alcantara is an NL Cy Young favorite. Clayton Kershaw does his thing. Luis Castillo, there's rumors he's going to LA anyway, but he's still pitching great for the Reds. Corbin Burns is one of the aces for this Brewers team. You have Max Fried, who's okay. You could argue Rodon over Fried. Gonsolin's having a career year. Musgrove, same for him. And then you have all the relievers. It's just hard to really argue someone in favor of for Carlos Rodon, but yeah, you can make the argument there. But it's just sad, to see how the MLB All-Star game has just and you can argue this with any All-Star game. It's just all these snubs that you think people put in. It's just crazy. But you definitely mentioned it. Having the satisfaction of having your name called as an All-Star is way better than just being a replacement. So in Ty France's case, obviously, I've heard he's kind of near the top of the list for replacements. And I heard Gilbert is on the top of as well. I think he's like top 2 or 3 in terms of replacements. But it's still, just a bunch of frustrations. I feel like we kind of get this every year. But I think this year it hurts a lot more to see Ty France not make it. But for all Mariner fans, and I think most of the MLB, I think they recognize him not only as an All-Star, but an All-Star starter over the guy we just beat, Vladimir Guerrero, who is sad. And don't even start with those Toronto fans. No disrespect, but all disrespect, Toronto fans. Y'all are ass, okay? Y'all are disrespectful. I've seen all the things on Twitter. Don't worry. I've literally seen all of the threads about how Toronto fans are bad and horrible, and I just find it absolutely disgusting. So if Toronto fans, do better. But anyways, just sad to see that Ty France is not even making it to the roster, that he has to be a replacement, even though the stats scream that Ty France is pretty much the best first baseman in the MLB in the American League right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, it's more of a popularity contest and less of who's actually producing the stats and the numbers and all of that. So, I mean, like you mentioned, also, it happens every year in pretty much every major sports, whatever All-Star game or Pro Bowl, whatever you want to call it. So I heard the idea of maybe like adding a few spots to each side, but then you can argue that makes it almost less of making it, because like there's so many people that make it. But I don't know. Yeah, I think this is inevitable every year that there's so many great players in the league and there's only so many spots. So it's kind of inevitable in that route. But I mean, like we've mentioned the stats of Ty France and leading AL first baseman like 4 or 5 major categories, and Luis Ariz plays first base like a 40% rate, whereas France is like a full-time first baseman. So it's not taking away from Ariz, but like him making it as a first baseman when he isn't a full-time first baseman is just what makes it so confusing. But so now we'll move on to, we have 5 questions that we're going to get into from the mailbag. We'll start with, what is the best rivalry in all of sports? Korea, you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, this is hard, honestly. Because, I mean, you could argue for so many sports. I mean, for baseball, you could argue Red Sox, Yankees. That's an argument. For football, you can go professional and college. For college, obviously, you'd say Michigan, Ohio State. And for the NFL, you could say so many for each division. But if I had to pick one that I've really enjoyed, and obviously I say this as like a neutral fan, because obviously you can say it as a fan of your own team. You obviously have some more influence than another. But in terms of just every single year, a rivalry or just a rivalry game that I look forward to is definitely Michigan versus Ohio State. Every year, it seems like those two teams are either just in conversations or one team is playing the other where it has effect on the college football playoff status. And, it just always seems like those two teams are always so competitive, and everyone circles the date for that big game late in the season between Michigan and Ohio State, because we know that's going to affect the college football playoff. And it will this year, because obviously Ohio State is in conversations for being in the playoff, while Michigan, I think they're in like Rose Bowl conversations. So they're both up there. So they're pretty much going to be the top two teams in the Big Ten. And now, in 2 years, when you bring in UCLA and USC, that you've even raised the competition a little more. So I think Ohio State, Michigan is definitely one of the best rivalries in sports, just because the history and the alum that went to both schools. I mean, you could list off Michigan's, Brady, Woodson. The list goes on and on and on. And then obviously Ohio State with all their accolades and all their teams and all that stuff. I think right now that's probably one of the best. But, I mean, you can make an argument for anyone, and I say, yeah, that's one of the best rivalries in sports. But, I mean, personally, I just feel like every year, the day after Thanksgiving, or that Saturday after Thanksgiving, I always look forward to seeing Michigan, Ohio State early in the morning. So, yeah, I definitely say that one. But it's hard. You can argue literally any single rivalry.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. That's a good one. I'm actually going in the college game as well, with Duke, UNC, and college basketball. It's just the game. Like, it seems like, especially fans-wise, like college gets, just to me, a little bit more hyped up than like professional. And obviously it's partially because these players are playing for themselves, the school, the city that the school is in. And then with Duke, UNC, it's like, I think it's like 15 minutes apart are the two schools from each other. So you have all those factors. I mean, for me, this is more so like the rivalry will also still be there. It's not going to be the same with both Coach K and Roy Williams, not being the coaches anymore, because those two kind of brought a lot to the rivalry, at least, in recent history. I mean, obviously the rivalry will still be there even without them. Not quite the same potentially, but just, from in my lifetime growing up watching sports, we had some incredible games between those two. I think Austin Rivers like a game-winning 3 in one of them for Duke. It's just and they play like twice a year. So all those games, and again, they're like so close together that you have so many fans for each team be at each game, no matter who is hosting the game. So I mean, obviously you have so many great professional sports rivalries. You mentioned Red Sox, Yankees, Dodgers, Giants. You had the Lakers, Celtics, back in the day. But yeah, I think college to me is just gets more hyped up just because the players. I mean, now with NIL it's a little bit different because they're making money, but in prior years you would have them playing for a lot more, and they'd have more motivation to play better in these games. So yeah, that's what I'm going with.
I mean, as a quick tidbit, I mean, you could even in college, you can say like some other ones like Red River rivalry, Oklahoma, Texas for football. For basketball, you can say Kentucky, Louisville. That's a big rivalry in Kentucky, because those two schools are usually good for college basketball. You could argue so many. There's literally so many rivalries that you could argue throughout sports, but I think that's a good one too. Duke UNC is a classic, obviously 15 minutes apart. We've seen, and both blue bloods, obviously, UNC being led by Roy Williams for so many years, and then Duke being led by Coach K until his final year this past year. And the history with it is definitely. And that's what you can even argue USC, UCLA for some people. I mean, those two schools definitely great schools in terms of what they've produced. UCLA good basketball, USC great football. So yeah, definitely so many rivalries in football and just any sport that you can argue.
Without a doubt. So now we'll get into the next question, which is fantasy football. Do you avoid drafting too many players on the same team on your fantasy football teams? I'll just kick off with this one. I mean, for me personally, I don't purposely avoid it. Like a running back and wide receiver on the same team. If it's at the right value, I'm not going to be scared to draft 2 players on the same team if it's at the right value. There's 2 sides to it. There's a lot of upside if that team has a big offensive week, obviously. And then there's the other side where if the offense struggles in the week, then chances are, those players might both have a down week for your team. But I mean, we've seen games where teams, struggle to score, but players still rack up a ton of yards and catches and whatnot. So I mean, I wouldn't say I purposely avoid it. It adds some weekly risk, to your roster if that offense has a bad week. But I mean, we're seeing so many great offenses, in the NFL these days to where I think that it can definitely work out as long as you're not, reaching for either player.
Yeah, I feel as if obviously there's certain situations like handcuffs, which is different. Like Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. There's certain situations where you kind of want to select so many players on the same team, and like situations like that. I mean, obviously, I agree with Ari. Like, I'm not gonna avoid them, but in terms of if it's a good value, I may take a look. Like running back, wide receiver, like I wouldn't be too concerned. Like if I drafted like D Hop as like someone like to stack on the bench, and I have like James Conner as my running back. Like I'm not gonna complain about that, just in case of like how I select D Hop in terms of value, and vice versa for James Conner. So I feel like it's all depending on what you're kind of looking for in terms of like what kind of values there. Like obviously, if you draft in the whole team, then obviously we may have a little bit of a concern there. But it's just all about what's kind of what you need for your value. And if it so happens that, you have two, say you have like Najee Harris and like Chase Claypool, both available, like if that's both, and, if that really value for your team, like, have Claypool as maybe like a wide receiver 3 or a flex, then so be it. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world, but, it's just, obviously it all kind of depends. Like say like the whole offense has a bad week, sometimes that'll happen, for football, and then all of a sudden they may have all of them have a good week, and you stack them on your bench. So it kind of just depends on what you're looking for in terms of value. But I mostly agree with Ari. It's just kind of, I wouldn't avoid it, but it's not like the number one thing I'm trying to avoid in terms of drafting. So
We'll get into another fantasy question, which we kind of touched on this topic in our last mailbag, but we'll kind of go over it again. The question's thoughts on Christian Watson producing as the top rookie fantasy wide receiver. For me, obviously the situation is different in Green Bay, with Devontae Adams leaving. I mean, one interesting stat that makes me super hesitant on Watson this year is that no receiver has ever topped 1,000 yards in their first 3 years playing with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. So clearly, it takes time for receivers to gain his trust, in that rapport. And so we look at like guys like Alan Lazard, Aaron Jones, Robert Tonyan, those guys returning that have already established that rapport. But I mean, if there's a year for a rookie receiver to have the first ever big year Aaron Rodgers, it would be this year with all that's opened up, with Adams leaving. So, I mean, I don't have Watson anywhere near my top 1 to 2 rookie receivers this year personally, but if there is a year, I don't have him up there for the reason of rookie receivers history with Rodgers. But if there is a year where it could happen, then it would definitely be this year, just given all the changes in the offense, losing as big of a piece as Devontae Adams is.
yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I feel like it definitely is an option. I feel like it definitely could happen, but this is the green. And you mentioned that stat that Aaron Rodgers has not passed to a rookie receiver in his first 2 years. They not had over 1,000-yard season, so that's definitely a big risk there. And Aaron Rodgers, he likes to work with a bunch of veteran receivers who know how to catch the ball in certain places. And you mentioned they brought in Sammy Watkins this offseason. They still have Alan Lazard. And I feel like Rodgers is definitely going to be prioritizing those two wide receivers on that offense a little more, just because he doesn't really know what Christian Watson can really do in terms of his production on the field. So I feel like I definitely could see it happening, but I feel like that number one receiver role is kind of not locked. But I think Rodgers would prefer to have like Lazard or a veteran who knows the game of football and how to get out of bounds on time, or stop the clock in certain situations and stuff like that. Play great situational football, but I'm not discrediting the fact that Christian Watson can't. I'm just saying I think Aaron Rodgers preferred a veteran leader. And so I feel like that could be a spot for like Watkins or Lazard, as you mentioned. But I mean, it's an option. I mean, I feel like it could happen. Just the likelihood of that happening is kind of low, just because I feel like, excuse me, I just feel like, Christian Watson may get a little overlooked in an offense that's full of veterans. Like as I said, they still have Tunyon as well. And out of the backfield, they still have Dylan and Aaron Jones. So I feel like he's going to be utilizing a lot of more veteran leaders and more players who have been on that Green Bay roster for a few years now, prioritizing them. But I feel like Christian Watson could have maybe a top 5 season, just depending on what the chemistry is like during training camp between Rodgers and Christian Watson. Now that Devontae Adams is gone, so it could happen. But I'm not saying that he'd definitely be the top, because I can definitely name at least 3 or 4 receivers who definitely may have better seasons than Christian Watson.
For sure. So, Korea, I'm not really sure what your history is with auction drafts, but I'll touch on this one.
I'll just say I personally have never done an auction draft, but I've seen them before. I've seen how they operate. Obviously you get a certain amount of money per draft, and top tier talent is worth more. Top not bottom talent, but not as great of talents in the NBA are a little cheaper. So I know that's kind of how it works, but. Ari, I'm going to let you handle this question.
So there's 2 ways that you can kind of attack auction drafts, and you kind of want to – either one can work. You just want to pick one and kind of stick to that one plan and not pivot. I mean, you could pivot because obviously you don't know beforehand what players are going to go for, so you still want to kind of have an open mind, but you kind of – so there's 2 ways you can attack it. There's the more balanced approach where you don't overspend on any one player, and you kind of you kind of build a more balanced roster. And then there's the other approach where you spend up on 2 to 3, maybe 4 players with, say, like 70-80% of your budget. Normally $200 is the normal budget, sometimes $100. And then you spend up on anywhere from like 2 to 4 players, and then the rest of your roster you just find value with like $1 to $2, $3 players as like kind of deep sleepers that you believe in. So normally, I mean, I've tried both kind of strategies. Normally I've found more success with the balanced approach, but at the same time, you normally can't really win a league without one really good player. So I mean, I've kind of had success with both strategies, and like I said, I've seen them both work out, whether it's me doing it or someone else. So, you kind of just want to pick one of those and stick to it as best as you can. But like I said beforehand, you don't know what players are going to go for, especially if you're in an auction draft with a bunch of other people who are doing it for the first time. So that kind of makes it tough as well, because more experienced auction drafters will obviously draft differently than people doing it for the first time. So like any redraft league, you want to have an open mind, but you kind of typically want to have one general strategy between those 2 that you kind of stick to, for the most part. So that's what I'll say on that. Do you have anything to add to that, or no?
I'm learning about auction drafts like that guy is. So you answered all my questions. All right, don't you worry.
Okay, so we'll get into the final question, which is kind of more geared towards you, Korea. And so, coming off the championship for the Warriors, as a Warriors fan, based off the moves made this offseason by teams, who do you view as, well, let's just say the top 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to say, the top threats to the Warriors? Who can prevent them from repeating this upcoming NBA season?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 teams right now. Definitely number 1 is the Boston Celtics. The way they are moving, they look like they want to make a championship run this year, and they are winning it this year. Obviously, you've talked about Malcolm Brogdon, them bringing them in. I know they just signed Danilo Gallinari as well. They are building a championship roster, because we saw what they did last year, and I think the Celtics are pretty much the number 1 contender to dethrone the Warriors right now. Out of the West, it's hard because, you don't really, obviously, you could say oh, well, Minnesota trading for Rudy Gobert, that could be something, but, they weren't really that great of a team last year. Right now, obviously, I could definitely see Dallas because they're making moves right now, but I feel like the whole NBA is kind of on pause with the whole Kevin Durant situation. And if he goes out west, like for the Suns, I'd say the Suns would definitely be way bigger contenders than us out of the West, especially over Dallas. But right now, I definitely see Boston as kind of the number one contender just because of the moves that they're making to really strengthen their team. And you could definitely argue the Bucks. The Bucks have made some strong moves this offseason as well. But I would definitely say the biggest ones are definitely going to be the Celtics once again. But, as soon as this whole KD Kyrie drama happens, I feel like we'll get a more clear vision of what the NBA is going to be looking like for anyone to really dethrone the Warriors. Just because of, but you got to look at the Warriors lost a lot of that rotational basketball. Losing Peyton, Porter, Damian Lee, a bunch of guys who were rotational guys, but still had a big impact on this team to their extent. And I feel like we lost a lot of that. We lost a lot of that bench rope, a lot of that bench, and that could be a factor as well. But in terms of just looking on paper right now, I definitely would think that Boston is kind of the number one contender.
I feel like Gary Payton's the only like a real contributor that you guys lost because like Otto Porter, Damian Lee, I mean especially Lee, and then you've added in hopefully a healthy Wiseman, Moody should have a bigger role, Kuminga. So you guys definitely lost a number of players, but then you also brought a number of players, and then you got DiVincenzo too, Mac McClung. Maybe he's a end of the bench guy too with how he's looking in summer league. So. Obviously it's easy to just look at, the NBA Finals and just kind of pick that team. But I think Boston was really missing a true point guard because we saw when Smart and Brown were trying to bring up the ball, turnovers was, the biggest issue for them. So I think bringing in someone like Brogdon who has that kind of calm composure to bring the ball up will help them a lot. The Clippers, if they're healthy with Kawhi, Paul George, if John Wall's even like 60% of what he was, old John Wall, they'll definitely be a contender. And I mentioned as well, once the Durant and Kyrie saga comes to an end, wherever they go, we'll have a better idea whether it's them staying in Brooklyn, like we've mentioned, as a possibility, or the Suns, Miami, wherever Durant goes. Obviously, if Kyrie goes to the Lakers, you can't count them out if they can stay healthy as well. It should be. It's been an exciting offseason already. Exciting summer, even like summer league play. And then before we know, we'll get into training camp preseason by October, and then we'll get into the season again. So it should be exciting. And now we're just a month and a couple weeks away from college football starting as well. And then like 2 months-ish away from the NFL season starting. So everything's coming together. It's, the dog days of summer right now, really just baseball. But we got the All-Star break coming up next week. And then by then it'll be basically the end of July, and we'll be into preseason NFL and then college football regular season next month. So it's pretty crazy how, time and the sport world is flying. But I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you all for tuning in. You have anything else?
Yeah, this is just, a little tidbit right here, but not breaking news, but just some more home run derby stuff for all the fans out there. Obviously, Pete Alonso, he said he's in, and we just got news that Acuna is back in. So we now have two competitors for the home run derby. We'll get to some more predictions probably by Friday, as we will hopefully have a full field for next week's derby on Monday, and we'll give our predictions as well, a little fun thing. Ari, who right now, Pete Alonso, and right now it's confirmed that we will have Pete Alonso and Acuna. We've also heard names of potentially Kyle Schwarber. He's considering it, but we'll see. He has a condition. We saw, I believe, over the weekend that Giancarlo Stanton may do it since he's going back to LA, his hometown. Other than the names I mentioned, do you have anyone that you want to see potentially compete in the home run derby?
Not to be biased, but I think it'd be fun to watch Julio Rodriguez compete in that. I think he would do really well in that type of environment, and just the way the home run derby works. So I'm sure he's the type of player at his age that would love to compete in something like that. I would think. He's the first that comes to mind. Obviously you have guys like Trout and Ohtani that I would think are guys that wouldn't want to be in, especially with how bad the Angels have been lately. I think that they would want to stay away from that type of event. But Was there any other players that you had in mind?
Yeah, one that, I mean, is kind of emerging on the scene right now out of Pittsburgh, O'Neal Cruz. I mean, he's kind of late, but I mean, the way he's hitting the ball hard. I mean, he's hitting balls out of the stadium. He's the skinny little man, but he is hitting the ball hard. So that would be, kind of something interesting to see out of him. But other than that, definitely I'd go for Julio. I'd love to see him. Just be able to compete. Have a young star on the stage and have a local boy that's been in the Mariners system for so long. Love to see that. But yeah, definitely would love to see out of the NL potentially O'Neal Cruz, someone like that, someone who just kind of came on the field, came on the scene so quickly, but has made a huge impact in this game so far with his ability to hit the ball and just his ability on the field is kind of ridiculous right now. I mean, I know I've seen Ari. I know you've probably seen what he's doing. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, those are definitely some guys I'd love to see. But I think this is going to be it. Ari, do you have anything else you want to say?
Apparently, ESPN did an entire segment based on a John Morant quote from the Twitter account Ballsack Sports. That's like the parody account, so that's that's pretty funny. But
I think I know which one you're talking about here.
That shows how much research that they put in. But I think that'll do it. Yeah, that'll do it. We'll be back on Wednesday. I'm not sure what we'll talk about, but we'll talk about just kind of everything, going on in the sports world with the All-Star break right around the corner in MLB. And then we're getting into training camp in NFL later this month. So we'll have some kind of news and reports to talk about on that. I don't know if you saw earlier today, there were a report that the Seahawks have had internal discussions around trading for Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't buy that at all. There's a report that came out that Garoppolo is going to be traded by the end of this month, according to some execs. So do you have any just kind of quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clickbait. Why would we trade for that contract? That contract is ridiculous, and I know Seattle would not be interested in taking in that contract with all the quarterbacks we've already taken in. But we have to restructure some things if we want to. But I don't think it's a realistic idea.
And it's also just kind of a rare kind of in-division trade that pretty much never happens too. But we'll get into all of that and more on Wednesday's episode. So thank you all for tuning in this afternoon. Please be sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe if you guys haven't already, and we will catch you all on Wednesday.